And thank you for joining me for our next interview in the 2020 one-on-one interview series, sponsored by Priority Real Estate Group. For those that haven't seen any of the videos yet, my name is Cory King. I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Mid-Coast Maine Chamber. The Southern Mid-Coast Maine Chamber does not endorse any candidates, nor is Priority Real Estate Group. Their support of this is in support of the Chamber, and it's not endorsed by any particular candidate. We're both doing this because we want you to get the information that you need to vote for your candidate, so you know who they are. And so our next interview is here. I'd like to introduce Peter Lewis. He is a House District 55 candidate. Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Cory. Thank you for having me here today. This is a great opportunity for me to reach out to the constituents in my district.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it is great. And I hope when we get done this video, those that like this, it's on Facebook for a reason, share it, send it around, send it to everybody that you know in the district. Speaking of the district, some people don't know what district they're in. So District 55, where is that?
Yeah, so that covers Bowdoin, Bowdoinham, Richmond, parts of, Swan Island, and parts of Perkin Township. So unorganized territory.
The unorganized territory. Yeah, it's almost all Richmond. There's a little sliver of Richmond that falls into someone else's. We don't talk about that side.
All
right. So Peter, real easy. We're just going to go through three big questions here. And the first one is the easiest one, which is who are you? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, great. So my name's Peter Lewis. Most people know me as Tony. My name's Peter Anthony. And I've always been called Tony ever since I was small, but legal names have to be used on ballots. So it's now I'm on the ballot as Peter Lewis. I'm next to the youngest out of 6 children. My dad was in the Marine Corps, and the family moved around a lot. So there isn't a single one of us kids that were born in the same state. Wow. I was actually born in Georgia. And shortly after I was born, my dad left the Marine Corps, and my family returned to Maine. So I've lived in Maine pretty much all my life, although I wasn't born here. I moved here, as I said, shortly after I was born. And I moved away from Maine on 2 occasions for work. Once was to go to work in Houston, Texas for about a year. And the other time was to go to work in Washington State for about almost 3 years. And I've worked in the technology industry for over 20 years, and those 2 opportunities, those job opportunities that I left the state for were for technology. One was working for a company in Texas in the oil industry. The name of the company was Western Geophysical. They've since been purchased. Actually, they were being purchased just as I was leaving the company, so they have a little bit different name now. But I worked offshore in the Gulf of Mexico doing deep sea exploration for oil and natural gas. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, so I worked on the boats doing the programming for analyzing the data as it came back up into our systems. Okay. We actually were able to map a 3D mapping of the sub-ocean floor in the Gulf of Mexico. So
see, that kind of technology blows my mind. Like that the fact that that's even possible is just wild to me. Yeah.
So that was quite an adventure, and I worked for 6 weeks on and 6 weeks off. So I was on the boat for 6 weeks and had 6 weeks to travel and do whatever I wanted to. And my wife now was with me at that point in time, and we were traveling back and forth to Maine. So we still actually lived in Maine. We just went down to Texas, spent a week, and then we went off on the boats and came back to Maine and traveled all over the country. So we had it was a little bit problematic because I do have a son, and at that point in time he was 5 years old, and he was living with my ex-wife, and being away from him for 6 weeks was quite a stress on us. So as soon as we could, we found an opportunity here in Maine for employment, and I returned to Maine as an employee here at a company in Bath, writing insurance rating software. And then I left that and went to Microsoft. So that was my next little venture outside of state. So I went to work for Microsoft back in the days of Y2K. Was one of the reasons I got hired there, was to go out and help them fix some of the systems where the dates needed to be calculated correctly and data needed to be re-entered and things like that. So, but then we had the World Trade Center attacks of 2001. And my son had been coming out to Washington State to visit me on summer vacations, holiday vacations, things like that. And he was only 6 years old. So it was very difficult. He had to take direct flights, and he had to take those flights out of Boston to Washington. So, we made the sacrifice, and, family is much more important than employment. And we came back to Maine, and, the rest is kind of history from there. I've been in Maine ever since. Worked for Unum Provident for a little while. My kind of specialty is helping companies build and organize their internal technology departments and software development departments. So I left Unum and worked for a company in Portland, Management Research Group, which was a psychological assessment company for leadership. So they've done assessments on George Bush, Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer.
Wow.
So they've done all that data. They've been through the system. So, and when I went to work for them, that was really why they hired me, was to come in and help them get things organized and build a team of people that could work together and work toward a common goal and produce the software platform that they would build their business on. And I did that with MRG. Then I left there, went to another company called Fortel Solutions, and then I left there and went to my current employer today, who's Lime Energy. So right now I work as the AVP of software development for Lime Energy, which is a company out of New Jersey. I work fully remote, so I work from home.
Yeah.
I do travel on occasion. I haven't traveled for a while because of the pandemic, which we'll get to later. So I work from home, and I went into that company, and they're an energy efficiency company. So energy is very important to me. We work with small businesses, and we do lighting and fixture retrofits for reducing energy consumption, which reduces the demand on the grid. It reduces the overall cost of energy for the small business, and it reduces the likelihood that the utility will need to build new infrastructure to support higher demand on the grid. So it's a big win-win for everybody. Good for the environment, good for the small businesses, and good for the energy company, and good for the regulators. So that's really where I'm at today.
That's a diverse background. I mean, you've lived many different places. You've been in different sectors with your IT knowledge, and you've gotten to see different sides of things. You've done some team leadership pieces too. I mean, that's a ton of stuff.
It is, and it's on a personal side. I moved to Bowdoinham in 2005 with my wife Kat and my son James, and we've been here ever since. We built the house on a small area on White Road that's close to the Richmond line, so very close to a town border. And we moved to town. We didn't have access to high-speed internet, which is a huge problem in rural areas. So it was difficult for me to work from home at that point in time, and we struggled right up until recently to make sure we had high-speed internet to be able to do my job and do my work. I'm an entrepreneur, and I own two small businesses. One's a technology consulting business, and the other one is in the firearms industry. I'm also an auto enthusiast. I used to restore old hot rods, and first generation Camaros were my favorite. And I used to drag race up at Oxford Plains Speedway, and I've recently turned back, when my son was really heavily involved, when he was much younger, and we were, focused on him and nurturing him and making sure he had what he needed to get to adulthood. I had to put away my habits and my hobbies. And after he graduated and moved away, I picked that hobby back up, and I now,
cool.
I race cars in an organization called the Sports Car Club of America. Yep. And it's kind of a semi-pro auto racing league. And I race all over New England and New York and Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. Yep.
Oh, that's so cool, man. That's a total, gosh, you got some unique stuff in there. So with this background, with all these things that you're involved in, you're running for office. So what's motivating you to run?
Well, I've been involved in the community, serving the community for quite some time now. I want to say it was 2012. It's been a bit of a blur because it all started with getting involved with expanding broadband in the area, right? So as I said, I'm a technologist. I work from home, and it's very hard to work with big pieces of data and platforms when you have a very small pipe to the internet, right? So dial-up was very cumbersome and hard to work with. So I went through the steps and tried to get various providers to come in and help me get faster internet, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't get anybody to bring it to me because of where I'm located and the services, the infrastructure just wasn't there. So I ended up renting a space in downtown Richmond to open up an office, and I had high-speed internet in my office there, but there were areas of that town as well that did not have high speed. And I got a newsletter from the town, and they were looking for people to get involved with their cable TV franchise agreement committee to help them renew that agreement and expand broadband. So I wrote to them, and I don't live in that town, but I work in that town. I run a business in that town, and I'd like to help. And they welcomed me onto the board, and in the course of about a year, we worked with Time Warner, and we were able to expand broadband to not everybody, but pretty much all of the unserviced areas in Richmond, which was a significant chunk of the town at that point in time. Yeah, and they got to, they got their franchise agreement renewed, and they got their broadband to the most of the areas. The areas that didn't get it were the very, very rural areas where the houses were just too far apart for it to be economically feasible for the company. So they stuck to the guns with those ones. But, all through downtown and all the in-town rural areas and business areas had been covered at that point in time. So,
I'm going to jump in right there and just let you know. I don't know if all the citizens realize what a big deal that is for recruiting employers, for including,
absolutely,
remote employees. Before I ran this chamber, I was running a chamber up in Skowhegan, and we ran into a lot of the same issues of not having the broadband. And I mean, we have such a wonderful quality of life in Maine that if we can expand our broadband and get high-speed internet, we can have all kinds of remote workers living here, getting their wages paid by these out-of-state companies, and spending it in our community. So it's such a big point that I don't think a lot of people realize. Anyway,
it is, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
And no, it's great. That's a very good point. I do plan to touch on that a little bit later in our conversation. So I moved from the Richmond committee and got involved with the the committee in my own town, and unfortunately we weren't able to work with any vendors because we're just we don't have a densely populated downtown area like Richmond did. So we just couldn't get any vendors to come in and work with us. So I'm not one to take no for an answer. And I decided, since the committee was going to be disbanded, I was going to try to join the select board in town and see if I couldn't, have a little more weight behind our project there. And so I ran for the select board. My first time I ran, I was not successful. I did not win the election. But the very next year, like I said, I don't give up easy. I ran for election again, and I got a seat on the board, and that was 6 years later, and I'm still there today. So, and I'm happy to report that after 6 years of working, supporting the town on many initiatives, broadband expansion was still the forefront in my mind, and a few other committee members and other people in town especially. So we worked with the Community Development Advisory Committee and kind of tasked them with vetting providers who could come in and partner with us to get a Connect Me grant to expand our broadband. And they came back with a few proposals for a few different vendors, and we picked one that seemed like the best one that would provide the highest quality of service, and we went with them. And they have now finished the infrastructure build in our town. We got a Connect Me grant. They finished the construction, and they've been installing to over 100 homes already in the past few months. So,
that's great.
And what you said about people, it's so important for our infrastructure to be built up so we can support this type of technology. And while we were going through this with the committee, there were people like me who worked from home who left town because they just could not get that reliable high-speed internet, and they had to have it. So that that was the choice. You either live in a nice small community, or you leave to the more urban sectors, and where you can have that coverage, and the quality of life. You got to balance that, and you lose that small hometown feeling and that lifestyle.
For sure. Well, hey, that transitions right into our third question, which is, there's a lot of issues that are out there. There's a lot of things that are facing Mainers in our local communities. What are some of the big issues that you think are affecting Mainers? Big issues that are important to you? Things that you're kind of keeping an eye on and are excited to tackle in the next question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are several, at the town level. One of the things we've focused on is property taxes, trying to keep those low. Cost of education just keeps climbing and climbing. And unemployment, those things, and a lot of this is, unemployment due to the pandemic. So we'll come back to that. So, property tax. We have an aging community in the state, and Bowdoinham has been recognized by the World Health Organization as one of the most aging-friendly communities in the world. Recently, that was just a few years ago, and we have a pretty significant percentage of aging population here. And as folks get older and they retire, and their income it drops to their retirement levels, they have a hard time supporting their home and keeping their taxes paid and things like that. And that's the number one reason seniors are forced out of their homes, is because they can't pay their taxes, and towns put liens on their property. They foreclose, they take the property so they can get their financial value. And these folks are put out with their family or nursing homes and things like that. So I think that we need to find more ways to help those seniors and people with low incomes to stay in their homes and without that worry, without that concern of, am I going to be able to pay my taxes? Am I going to lose my home in 2 or 3 years? So property taxes, unemployment, this pandemic has the whole world, not just Maine, not just Bowdoinham, Richmond, Bowdoin, has the whole world in a frenzy right now. The economy everywhere is in the tank. It's just small businesses are closing their doors. Originally, it was supposed to be for a short period of time, and this lockdown just keeps going on and on and on. It's almost endless, and there's no real end in sight. And it's just devastating to small businesses and families who rely on those small businesses either for wages or they're losing their family business that they've been working on forever. And we need to find a way to come back and come together and bring the legislature back in session so that it's not just one person running the state, and figure out how we address that pandemic and how we address the economy. We have almost $1 billion shortfall in our state budget now, and it's projected to be even worse by the end of the next fiscal year. And raising taxes is not the right answer. We already have people who are stretched financially to their limits, and they can't afford what they have now. If we take more out of their pockets, it's going to be even worse for them. So we need to be looking at the budget that's been presented, the budget we've been operating on, and figure out take a look at build a list of needs and build a list of wants. That's the best way to look at a budget and figure out how you're going to afford to operate, and start carving out some of those wants and start focusing on the needs, and start redirecting some of those funds to programs that can assist these small businesses and homes with the financial distress that they're in.
Well, and as a town selectman, I mean, that's what you've done. You've worked with the town budget every year. In your businesses, you've worked with budget, so you've got that budgeting experience for sure. I do want to say 2 points to the unemployment. Number one is we did a chamber. We did a survey through chambers. I wrote it with the Portland Chamber, and we sent it out in May when the first reopening plan was announced. And the most telling stat from that survey is we asked people, what if this plan is implemented the way it is, what are your anticipated losses for 2020? And we had 1,400 businesses that responded. And the number that came back was 52.5%, which is, just a staggering. That means if the chamber does as much as we can, if we reopen full bore right now, the best we can hope for is a 30% loss, kind of across the board. And that would be the worst year anyone's had in 10 years. I mean, it's something that's going to stick with us for so long. And the other thing that you read about, you said too, which, and again, I don't know if constituents understand, like, no small business is going to tell you how close they are to their bottom line.
Right.
No one's going to tell you, hey, I need to do $1,000 in sales this week, or I can't make my mortgage. Like, it doesn't serve them to tell you that. And so, just if you love a small business out there, don't presume they're doing great. If you can help them out, and if you can support them, trust me, they won't tell you that, but they need your support right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, now more than ever, buy local is so important to keep your community thriving and keep your small businesses in your towns and in your areas, operating. And I mean, it's not just the business that's going to still be there. It's the people who work for that company that can keep their livelihood, and things like that. So it's very important. So.
So just a few minutes left, but I know you had a couple more issues I think that you wanted to kind of tell us about that are important to you.
Yeah. So I mean, unemployment again it's all about we've had some speed bumps, if you will, trying to get unemployment implemented correctly in the state, and with the pandemic, and right now we have the stimulus bill, which was providing $600 a week to help with families who have lost their employment, and get them above and beyond what they were getting before, the benefits that were available to them, to kind of keep them in a status quo so that they don't have to worry about losing their homes and they can feed their families, things like that. That recently got reduced from $600 to $400. And that eventually will go away as well. And we need to come up with some programs and some procedures for how we get these people back into the workforce, right? How we get them, especially with all these small businesses that have gone under. Some of those jobs just don't exist anymore. So we need to figure out how we're going to work with, either how we lift up the small business community so those businesses can either reopen or new businesses come in and take their places. And we can get those jobs opened back up for our communities and our citizens. and just make sure that if they need re-education, that those re-education programs are available too.
Right.
Trade schools, better grants and tuition assistance for students who need to be re-educated because whatever type of business they were in just isn't operating anymore in their local area. And we need to understand that there isn't a single, I'll take that back, there's only one industry that wasn't affected negatively by this pandemic, and that's the health industry, because they're still all working and making their paychecks. They're impacted in different ways, but financially, they're probably one of the industries that has not been affected by this at all. But there isn't a single industry in this country or in the world that hasn't been impacted by this.
Yeah.
And so it's the wide gamut of folks that are impacted, and we need to come up with programs and processes and procedures we can follow to assist them to get back on their feet.
For sure, for sure. Well, that's great. Well, Peter, I could talk to you all afternoon, but I do want to bring us in. Is there any other things that you want? I mean, you've thrown out a lot there, and we talked about a lot of things. And any other things that you want to hit, or you feel pretty good?
No, I feel pretty good. I mean, those are really the key things. It's all about community. It's all about working together. We need to come together on both sides of the aisle. We need to put partisan politics aside and work as a team and bring everybody's strengths together. Budgeting, planning, organization, community outreach, communication. All of that plays a big part in operating even as the smallest municipal government. And we need those minds that can come together and put together the plan that's going to dig us out of this hole.
For sure, absolutely. And I will say one thing that you said reminded me, the career and technical education piece that you said. The chamber was actually, we were going to launch some workforce programs. And what they were kind of in two buckets, and one bucket was talking about what you talked about of connecting the businesses and the schools, and the other bucket was trying to look at some of these barriers, from affordable housing to broadband to healthcare to transportation, all these other things, because we need to start looking at those. So offline afterwards, we can talk a little bit more about that. I'll give you some things that we've been working on just so you have an idea.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
But, last question. If people want to connect with you, want to meet with you, or find out more about you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. So I do have a Facebook page for my campaign. It's facebook.com/Peter Lewis ME55. So it's my first name PETER, last name LEWIS, ME for Maine, and 55 for the district that I'm running for. I do have a website as well. That's peterlewis.org.
Yes.
And I have an email address, which is peter.lewis@peterlewis.org. And you can always reach me on my cell phone at 207-318-5416.
Awesome. Well, Peter, thank you so much. I do want to say a thank you to Priority Real Estate Group again for sponsoring this series. And I want to encourage anybody that's watching this video, and if you love what you heard, pass it around. We're posting it on Facebook and on YouTube for a reason, so that people can share it and help spread the word and get Peter's message out there. But Peter, thank you so very much.
That's great. No, thank you, Cory, for this opportunity. And as you said, there's only a short period of time. So if there are more questions people have, you have my contact information. Happy to answer any questions you have or go over any issues that you are dealing with, and see what I can do to help or answer any of those questions.
Peter, that is great. Thank you so much. And for those out there in viewing world, we will see you next time.
Thank you.